But I just want to encourage us to break out of maybe the framework that encourages us to always judge our own performance and think more about, like, a good way to judge your performance as a lecturer would be, how are the students doing? Did they get what you wanted them to get? And that's a good measure. And that has nothing to do with whether you stood on the left side or the right side, or whether you blocked the slides, or whether you moved this way or that way, right? It's really about what's happening in the students' heads and what their learning experiences. So I want us to think about, in general, looking at it that way. And our overview, the way we're going to go about that today, in general, I want to start off by contributing a certain set of knowledge and skills. The idea is that we will look a little bit at sort of what's some recent research, wisdom in the literature about lecturing, and then we're going to look specifically at 4 strategies that help us focus on the student's experience. We think a lot about MOOCs, massive open online courses, and then small open online courses and mini open, like all kinds of online environments that could be 100% online, or they could be blended. But there are other ways of delivering a lecture that separate you further or give you greater challenges to figuring out if students are getting the message. But in fact, all of those online opportunities, even though they provide a kind of apparatus that physically removes you from the space that you're in with the student, there's this virtual space that has other opportunities for checking in to see if students are getting the message. Blended environments are similar. Like, I think I don't want us to be so caught up with the tools and the specifics of the performance techniques as much as I do with, in general, how do we know students are getting it? Because that's really our measure of success. Flipped classrooms and disruptive innovation, Clay Christensen, and there's been talk about flipped classrooms in a lot of different pieces, but you see some citations here. These are ways, sort of trendy, recent ways of trying to cope with recent technological innovations and the state of higher ed in general. Larger class sizes are a result of smaller funding to higher ed, right? So these are kinds of strategies that are in the news lately because they are helpful at dealing with this really essential question. Are the students getting what we want them to get? Right? So I want you to take all this in with a grain of salt. Like, this is all good, this is helpful. You'll find a lot of specific advice about strategies you can use, but I'm going to try to focus you on that bigger question of, how do we know we're doing well? How are the students doing? If the students are getting it, then that's a good measure of your lecturing performance, right? Of your lecturing success, and of your teaching success in general. Oops, I've gotten backwards. Okay. So you see an image from the 1350s, 60s. It's a European kind of model of lecturing and of education where you have, this is called the sage on the stage model, right? You've heard of this a lot, where you have the professor who's literally in an elevated position, in this case, in a pulpit, kind of. And then you've got rows of students. And centuries later, this is still a kind of predominant model of how we educate. And if you take a look at what these students are doing, it amazes me when you look carefully at this illustration, because you can see that what are these students doing that you actually see students doing in class? I'm going to make it darker so you can look at this. So like, pick out for me what you see students doing. Like, okay, obviously, you ever see that? Right? Chatting, yeah, we got some chatting going on. We got some movement and chatting. What's going on there? There's some kind of social interaction happening there. Yeah, okay, so that's like the equivalent of what you see when you look out. Texting, or a laptop, or something. Maybe they're reading something related to the lesson, maybe they're taking notes, right? But it could equally be a distraction. We got any model students in here? Anybody doing what we actually would want them to do?
In the front
Okay,
row,
like here's
girl,
something, yeah,
you know.
there we go. Like totally enthralled and giving you the eye contact, like that's the ideal. This person's maybe thinking great thoughts related to what you're talking about. But, so you see, like this is a kind of traditional experience. These are not new challenges that we're facing. We have new strategies, we have new technologies, but these are not new challenges.
These haven't changed much.
in some ways, in some ways the challenges haven't changed much. Some of the specific strategies and techniques may have changed a bit. But I want us to, and like I said, I want us to focus a little bit more on the student's experience as a judge of how we're doing, right? As a measure of how we're doing. So in an ideal world, what should students be doing? You want some eye contact? With who? With the teacher, probably. Yeah.
Whoever, but yeah. Like
or their like whoever it is that they're supposed to be talking to about. Okay. What else?
To ask questions.
Good. We want some asking of questions. Yeah, what else?
Positive body language, like shaking their head, or responsive body language.
Yeah, that's good. Something that gives you a read on how it's going, on how they're doing. Yeah.
Taking notes.
Yeah, good.
Adding on to that, taking notes, but also sort of engaging with the material that's being taught in class and thinking about it, not just taking verbatim notes.
Good. That's great. Yeah, kind of like processing and summarizing and that sort of, yeah. Evaluating what you're saying. I mean, that's some heavy lifting over there. Like, we're getting more demanding with what we actually want now. What else do you think you want them to do?
Answering questions.
Okay.
Advancing the conversation.
Yeah, participate. Yeah. That's good. And then over here I missed.
Oh, I was going to say contribute to or apply the information to something.
Nice. Like, these are big asks. And when we're talking to students, without structuring an opportunity for them to do this, we're relying just on those students who get that that's what we wish they would do. We're just relying on them to structure some way for them to do that for themselves. Right? So it's actually kind of hard what we're expecting. It's kind of difficult. So if you think about it, I am kind of asking you to think hard, right? But I'm also going to give you an opportunity to apply strategies, to apply concepts as part of, if this were a lecture. I'm building in an opportunity for you to apply the concepts so that you could go off and think about how that might change things. Because ultimately, these kinds of activities, right, all these active things here, this is all causing change, right? If you are lecturing with these goals in mind, if you want this to be happening with the students, you're actually trying to cause change to happen. You want them to go do something besides listen. But the structure that we have, like the physical structure still built into our buildings, makes it hard to structure opportunities for this stuff to happen. But if you've got a piece of knowledge, like a concept, that's really critical, or a skill that they have to be able to do again, you've got to give them an active opportunity to do this kind of stuff. And your built environment is not helping you out. You have to work against the structure that is built around you in a lecture hall to make opportunities for that to happen. Okay. I remember I said I don't want you to obsess about your performance and where you stand. I mean, already, we're going to go back over this later, but how many times have I already turned my back to you and walked in front of the projector? Like, it's okay on that level of tiny detail to not be perfect. And you will still get your message across. Students will still be able to do something about what you just told them. But here are 4 general ways that anybody, regardless of your own personal lecturing style, here are 4 things, and these are on your handout right at the top. I am not hiding the ball, okay? These are 4 things you can do, and we're going to watch some lecturers who do this, and you're going to think about ways you could do this. But anybody could do these 4 things, and there are 4 really good ways of making sure that students get what you're trying to give them. So one is to introduce and conclude any meeting whether it's online or on-site, with an overview of the purpose, the task, and the criteria. And I started with that, like here's our purpose, here's the knowledge, here's the skills, here's the task, here's how we're gonna do it, and here's the criteria, here's how we're gonna know if we did it the way we wanted. And I'm gonna come back to that at the end with another slide to wrap it up with that format of purpose, task, criteria. Then you wanna set up for the students an awareness of their need to know the thing that you're about to give them, and a desire for them to know that thing. You want to help them feel a little motivation and a little need, because they're getting barraged with so much information all the time. And they're having to make choices about like what's going to stick in there, what matters, what helps me. So you want to create for them an opportunity to see, oh, I need this, and I want this. Okay? And we're going to look at ways that lecturers do that. Then another one is what we've sort of talked about before, encouraging students to practice the skills and apply the knowledge that you really need for them to have, those critical pieces of knowledge, and those skills they have to be able to keep doing. Okay? You've got to structure that into the class activities, because they often will not go do that on their own. Most students, the majority, will not go off and do that on their own if they don't have an opportunity that you create for them to do it. And then you want to invite students to think about how they're learning. This is the term for this, there's a whole body of literature about this, metacognition, but it just means thinking about how you think, thinking about how you learn. And you want students to take charge of thinking about how they're learning. And here are 3 questions that Fred Mosteller coined in, I want to say, the early 80s, and you've got a citation to him, I believe, here. Yep, it's the 3rd to last one on your bibliography. And actually, if Ashley, can you send them the digital version of this? Because it's live linked to the publications. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, so after this, actually, I'll give you the live link so you don't even have to look these up. But 3 basic kinds of questions. And it doesn't matter exactly how you phrase these questions, but the 3 questions are sort of, what are the takeaways? What are you taking away, the important points? And you can ask them for 2 or 3. Okay? What's still unclear to you? Which is your way of knowing, oh, I need to go back and reteach this part because they didn't quite get that. And then, what do you want to hear more about? Which is your way of finding out, how do I link to what they care about? And then next time, create more of a motivation, more of that awareness that they want to know something I'm about to give them, and they need to know. Okay? So those are 3 really good questions you could ask. In person, on paper. Maybe we'll try it on paper today. So here's your 4 strategies. That's your 4 takeaway points for today. Anybody can do those 4 things in their own style, at their own discretion, as much or as little as they like. And that will help you get a really good read on how the students are doing, which is your measure of how is my lecture going. Okay, so what do these look like in practice? Right now, I'm going to show you on these laptops a few different examples. I'm going to just list them for you, and then we'll go back to that list of 4 points so you can even look for them while you're on the videos. But the reason why we're doing this, just to outline it for you, just to give you that motivation, so you're going to really get a deeper knowledge of those 4 strategies. You're going to see what they actually look like in practice. You're going to apply those strategies to analyzing video clips. And then after that, I'm going to ask you to apply them to your own classes, where you might use them. So a good question to test a student's understanding of if you taught them effectively in the lecture part is an intuitive grasp of how it affects their life kind of question, right? And that applies, I mean, I know it's a STEM example, but like that's a lesson that would apply across, it's a strategy for us that would apply across the disciplines. And so he spends maybe a minute posing the question, then they talk for a minute, and then he has this minute of like looking at their responses and seeing if they got it. And then it might cost him another few minutes to re-explain if they didn't get it. But if he does that 3 times, then that probably takes, let's say an outside estimate would be 15 minutes out of an hour class, And so, but you'd have to do the math for yourselves, because as you say, not all questions are gonna be 1-minute discussions. So you might give up 15 minutes for a bigger discussion that would develop a lot of the key concepts or skills for the course, right? But these are really good questions. I remember us talking, I remember us in the center talking about the amount of time that you could hold a student's attention, like what's their attention span. And we thought, as a staff, that his 15-minute estimate was, like the reason that 15 minutes is good is not necessarily that he had 3 key concepts to cut and he could fit that in, but that 15 minutes was maybe the attention span that we had before we had to shake it up and get students to move around. Now, I don't think we have 15 minutes anymore. Like I think we have to be even more active. But you'll know from your students in the context of your topic how much time you have before you need to inject something for them to start thinking about. How do you balance what time you spend in class and what time you're going to spend in office hours later for the 25% who didn't get it, right? How much are they going to then lose from the next concept that you have to go, right? It's a really interesting calculus. It's very personal to each class context. Right? There's 4 takeaway concepts that I want you to have. And I want you to know what they look like, how you would use them on your own, how would you make your own choices about these concepts, right? And so my measure of success isn't correctness, it is applicability. Like that you figure out how to apply it for you. And I'm not gonna look at what's on the back of your page where you're writing away what I'm gonna do about this. For correctness, it's up to you to decide how it applies in your life. So that's a case where there isn't a right answer, but at least when we get to the end slide, you'll see, like, I'll have the criteria up, did this happen? And that's our kind of measure of success. But you're absolutely right, like you have to be creative to think about how success is measured at the end of each conceptual unit. How would you measure that that was successful in your class? Because it won't be 7 or 4.3 all the time, right? There will be some fuzziness about the correctness or the applicability. So, here you see an example of people thinking that there's an Earth-centered universe versus a sun-centered universe, right? And so they watch how students who start off with the misconception will layer onto that everything they learn about what you're teaching them about the solar system, but with this fundamental misconception that you didn't know was there. You're not going to make all those 4 things happen every class meeting, but you could do it for 2 or 3 class meetings, or you could do it once in a couple of class meetings in the first time you teach the course, and then a few more times the next time you teach the course. Like, the good news is that any amount of this, more than what you're doing now, is an improvement. It makes the student's learning experience better. Any amount is better, right? So it doesn't have to be 100% of the time, because anything is better. How many students do you think were in that lecture hall?
Yeah, 200 at least.
At least 200, could be 500, but that was massive, right?
Maybe 10 actually.
What do you think made those students just stand up and voice their ideas in front of a few hundred people that day? What made them feel like they were, what do you think?
They obviously felt very comfortable with him because, you know, when he sort of walked in, they all started clapping and there were some cheers.
Yeah, that happens all the time, right?
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's why I like showing these sort of famous lectures, because we can find things that even they could do better. We can find things where we do it our way. But yeah, so they're comfortable with him.
Right.
He asked for counter arguments. It was really any possible counter argument. So he wasn't asking if you agreed or disagreed. He wasn't asking them to take a moral stance on the topic, but what are holes in this? Where would this fail? And I think that's, even though it seems open-ended, it's more focused, more planned.
But if I say the word utilitarianism and you picture a Roman being destroyed by lions in a forum in front of an audience of thousands, you're more likely. And if you see a sort of combative, like, here's a problem, professor, and here's a problem, professor, if you see that kind of interaction happening, the basic concept's going to stick with you more, right? So it's a great exercise, but you're right that it privileges a certain kind of student. So maybe you don't do that every time, and maybe you use other kinds of exercises like the think, pair, share that privilege other, or that appeal to other styles of learners. It's okay to mix it up as long as you're appealing to multiple styles of learners over the period of your time with them. Just don't always pick one exercise style that appeals to you because it feels comfortable and it appeals to a certain kind of learner, but try to vary enough so that you appeal to multiple learning styles. And the skills piece of the purpose was for you to apply those 4 strategies, both to other people and to yourselves. The task we did, right? I talked, you reviewed, you applied. And now I think you're walking out with ways to know if students are getting it and strategies that you can use, plus some sub-strategies. So in my view, that is success. I feel like I am convinced that you're going to go off and do something now that relates to the 4 takeaways that were on the screen for most of this session, right? These guys. So I got my message across, you get the concept, and not only do you get the concept, I'm pretty convinced that some of you are going to actually go try to do something about this. How much time did I spend teaching or lecturing versus how much time did you spend interacting and applying? If you were to guess at the ratio for today.
Matches your 1/3.
It might be 1/3, 2/3. Usually I come in at half and half, even though I try for 1/3, 2/3.
It feels like 1/3.
That's good. That's good. But that means that you're taking away knowledge, like you made that your own, you're taking it away and you're going to apply it. So that's success to me. Let's point out how many things I did wrong in terms of the way that we judge lecturers, just to prove the point that success has been achieved, yet what did I do that did, like I singled out a student, right? I walked in front of the screen how many times? Did anyone count?
22.
22. How many times did I turn my back to you?
Couple.
What's the quality of my handwriting? I mean, there's a basic structure to it. What we want, what we do, right? Specifics of how you do what we do, right? There's a structure, but it's not beautiful. You don't have to perform perfectly in order for students to leave with a concept that they're going to go do something about, or a skill set that they're going to go use. You can succeed without looking like a fabulous lecturer, because you know that students got what you wanted them to get.